Hello and welcome everybody to According to Andrew number 63, fourth generation warfare. Now, this is a topic that I might have touched on here and there throughout my speakings and various topics, but I haven't actually talked on what it is. Um, and so I wanted to kind of touch on that and give my audience who hasn't heard of this stuff before some context as to what this stuff is, or maybe some new people that stumble across this can give some context. So the two main people that pioneered this way of thinking is Martin Van Creveld in his Transformation of War book and the Fourth Generation Warfare Handbook by William Lind, which are both on screen for you right now. They're very good books and pretty easy to read as well, and not very long. So the overall amount of pages you need to read in Lynn's book is around 50 tops, and the Transformation of War is a little bit longer, but it's still only a little over 200 pages. So very easy reads. Right after Sun Tzu's Art of War, I think they're definitely top reads that you need to pick up if you're interested in this kind of topic. Maybe it's worth picking up and finding out whether or not you actually are interested in this topic. But the basic idea that both these books lay out is how war over the years has transformed in the modern era from being fought between states to being fought between different entities. So it's between states and non-state actors, and so what that means is that the nature of warfare has changed. So modern warfare starts in the first generation when states are invented, right at the Peace of Westphalia. And Lind has a whole thing on this. If you've seen that, then I'm just kind of recap some of that stuff. But that's that. Also, in the description of this video, I will leave a link to basically what is the Fourth Generation Warfare Handbook if you don't want to buy it or you want to see what it's about a little bit beforehand, because it is a published manual for a couple of militaries throughout the world, and so it's free online if you can find it, the PDF. I do suggest getting a physical hard copy of it just in case if stuff goes down, you're going to want the physical version. But if you're short on cash, you can always take the PDF and print it off as well. So, origins of modern war. The origins of modern war start with the Peace of Westphalia and basically the establishment of states as unique entities that have a complete monopoly on war. It's a very ordered way of conducting war. That's where you have, like we have up here with Napoleon, the the very ordered and structured way of fighting war, where you have your battle lines. They're going to stand up against each other. They're going to shoot each other. That's how things are going to work, and it's very good for command and control and keeping your soldiers organized and stuff like that. And with the technology at the time, it was the proper way to fight things. Then we get into second and third generation. This doesn't actually develop until the First World War, because after the Napoleonic War, there were no major wars fought in Europe until the Great War. There were kind of skirmishes here and there and various things, but nothing on the scale of Napoleonic type war until World War I. So that's when you get the development of the second and third generation warfare. Second generation warfare is what the United States military uses, and it came out of the French philosophy when they were getting they ended up in a massive siege, and so because the French saw it as a massive siege, they decided, okay, well, since we're in a siege, let's treat this as a siege. And so that's kind of what they did. They used mass artillery in places, and they would do rolling barrages to push people up and remove them from their position. The basic, easy way to summarize it is you bump into the enemy and you call for fire support. So that's how the second generation worked. And it was effective in the First World War. But it would end up ultimately falling to the third generation, which was simultaneously developed by the German army. The German army had a much different way of thinking about the military and tactics and stuff like that, and moved away from a centralized command and control structure, which the second generation preserved, and much more to a individualist, tactics-based structure. And that's where you get a lot of their advanced, very effective units like the stormtroopers and uh, in the late World War I era, and some of these other advanced infantry tactics that come out of this. And so what they invent basically is a what really takes off in the Second World War, which is what is known basically as maneuver warfare, and that is the idea that you are going to uh, let the pieces on the ground maneuver and communicate with each other in such a way that you can capture large sections of the enemy's military without ever actually having to fight that military and removing those pieces from play. That's how third generation warfare is fought, and it does not work from a top down perspective. You have to let the soldiers on the ground make decisions, um, and make mistakes and do a lot of thinking for themselves. And that is not how the United States military works, and that is not how most militaries around the world operate today. And it is absolutely devastating, because when we get to the fourth generation of warfare, the third generation can sort of deal with it, but a second generation warfare unit gets utterly run over, because while you're calling for fire support and trying to figure out all this other stuff with your command, the enemy is making decisions and outmaneuvering you to such a degree that you can't possibly um, figure it out. And part of the issue is that second generation warfare also kind of thinks in terms of, well, we'll just try to cut the head off the snake kind of thing. And there is no snake to cut head to cut off, because instead of a large mass body that you're fighting, you're basically trying to fight a swarm of gnats or mosquitoes or something like that. And you might get one or two here, but the matter of the fact is the swarm is still alive, and you can't swat a swarm of mosquitoes. They'll move around you. They'll outmaneuver you, things of that nature. So that's where fourth generation warfare really kind of moves and shines. The reason that you had this development was because of nukes. So basically, whether or not nukes are real doesn't really matter, because the matter of the fact is people act like nukes are real. So that's the only thing that really matters. And the nukes uh, are basically prevent two states from fighting each other. And because they can't fight directly with each other, they basically fight through proxy wars through places like Vietnam and Afghanistan and Iraq. And all these are like proxy wars for other things going on within the world, that basically is two nuclear powers fighting through a second state that isn't a nuclear power, and therefore nukes never enter into the equation. That's basically the thought process behind it. And the problem with that is now you introduce a new factor into the overall warfighting, because now guerrilla warfighting becomes much more effective. And that's basically what fourth generation warfare is. It's guerrilla warfighting that has become far more effective in the modern age, because small arms fire and light infantry tactics are the dominant force within warfighting nowadays. There are aspects, if you're going state versus state, yes, the U.S. military has the biggest gear and stuff like that, and they can run and occupy and stuff like that, but it's like fighting that swarm of gnats. They You might occupy where they previously held, but they'll just fly around you and again come in and attack you from another direction, and it doesn't really matter. And eventually, you're going to be worn down and give up, and the gnats will still be there. So unless you're willing to completely move into an area and remove its current population and settle your own population in that place, and completely replace the people, there is no actual win condition for the state actor, and that puts them in a bind that they can't really get out of. So, fourth generation tactics. Let's So yeah, so that's kind of what fourth generation warfare is. It's not. I didn't explain it as clearly or as succinctly as Lynn did, but you know, buy his speech on that if you're interested more in that. Um, so that gets us to one of the other aspects of this whole thing, which is the grid. So this is the new way of looking at warfare in a fourth generation perspective. And this has kind of always existed, but it is far more important now. So you have these three levels. You have your moral, your philosophical, or your psychological, and your physical, and you have your strategic, operational, tactical. So the left-hand side used to be the ones that people were used to working with. You You had plans on the strategic level that you wanted to do. You would set up an operation to accomplish those strategic goals, and then on the lowest level, on the soldier level, they would make tactical decisions to make stuff happen. Now, uh, the problem is you've now got this other aspect, and the most important aspect in the previous one was strategic, and the most important one in this one is moral. You might have a strategic plan that relies on the physicality, but the enemy is going to use some tactically moral decision and completely destroy your entire strategic plans. And that's basically how terrorism and these guerrilla warfare fighters and stuff like that went out. Because quite frankly, the people that are coming in and basically invading their country, not basically, they are invading their country, have a huge hill to climb up in terms of winning the people over. And so to win the people over, you basically need to actually lose more people than you kill, because it is because by losing more people than you kill, you're showing that it isn't about winning the war. It isn't about trying to kill you. It's a strategically moral imperative to to win the people over and get you on your side. Now, when it comes to occupying places like Iraq and Afghanistan, that's a hard sell for the American public because they don't care about being there. So that's kind of the bind that America's in right now with those wars. But these are the kind of the ways to deal with stuff. Um, so the moral level is the most important. You know, uh, if a unit, uh, a great example that Lind uses in his book is that there was a procession of like a dead soldier from in Afghanistan or Iraq that was coming by, and the unit that the commander was uh, or that the captain was commanding told them all to stop, take off their helmets, and pay respects to the soldier. And so that really did a good job of kind of winning the people over, and it got a lot of good press and stuff like that. And these are kind of the ways that you need to think about stuff. And this stuff also applies to the culture war right now, because this is how this whole thing is playing out. I know it can get frustrating. I know I was frustrated recently with how things are playing out, and just kind of thinking like, well, if they're going to paint me in a immoral light anyway, what's the point of acting moral anyway? But that is a losing strategy when you look at this overall thing. The more you can stand on a moral basis, it doesn't matter if they're screaming from the rooftops that you're an immoral person. Eventually, it'll show through. So that is the kind of the ways of thinking about that stuff. And so part of the way that this works is the U.S. military and stuff like that has started adopting, or at least in the book he talks about adopting things like not wearing body armor and walking around in more regular everyday type clothes. So that way you don't look like an occupying force, and you look like you're there to help people and stuff like that. And it makes it so that people can trust you, and you don't look like an absolute juggernaut, basically like um, an alien in another person's world there to occupy and dominate these people. So that's kind of the way. So obviously, moral is the most important. Psychologically, you mess them up psychologically by, uh, there's various tactics that you can do to do this. One psychological trick that I've heard for breaking up crowds or whatever is to randomly snatch people from the crowd. This was brought up by Michael Malice of way that the communists would um, destroy movements against them. Is basically the leader would be like, look, I'll take the fall for this. Like, don't worry. As long as you guys continue to back me, like, I'll take the fall. Don't worry, and everything will be good. So instead of snatching the leader, what they would do is they would just snatch random people out of the group and arrest them and put them in jail and stuff like that. And what this did was it was a psychological warfare, because they couldn't figure out why they were being snatched up and stuff like that, and it caused fear and panic within the ranks, and then the overall movement would break down. And that's especially effective against large bodies of people where you only need a couple chains to break for the entire thing to collapse. Think of a rout in a military sense, where as long as your buddy's still standing there holding the shield wall, you're good. But the instant he runs, now the chance that you go run is good, and then it starts a mass rout. That's kind of what the psychological aspect's supposed to do. And then the physical obviously is pretty straightforward. You're going to use force to harm someone, or force through some of your ideas and stuff like that. So, but it is doesn't work very well, and it is highly resisted by most people because they just see you as a brute, and it's very understandable. That's why the whole idea. That's why Martin Luther King's movements work. That's why Gandhi's movements work. That's why the early church Christians and Jesus worked so well, because people used physically assaulted people who were doing a morally strategic. They they made a physical tactical decision, which then hurt them on the moral strategic level to such a degree that they ultimately lost the fight. So those are kind of ways to think about it. This is only going to become more and more prevalent, and what the shift is going to cause into like the next generation warfare is going to be interesting to see. There's apparently a fifth generation warfare that some Chinese generals or lieutenants came up with. I haven't read that yet, but I would like to. But I have a feeling that the fifth generation warfare is not so much a direct response to fourth generation warfare, but it's more of a sidestep of the issue. And so, therefore, from what I have heard about it, it's more like we can't fight these wars in this way anymore, and so therefore we're going to fight not on the battlefield, but on all other fronts, economic and other ways of taking down a nation outside of warfare. And so this is how they get around the issue of fourth generation warfare. They don't need to fight proxy wars anymore, because we're going to fight proxy wars through economic means and things like that. So it's not really a counter to fourth generation warfare. It's not really an evolution, but it is a smart sidestepping of the issue. It's also very in line with the Chinese way of thinking. If you think about the U.S. military right now, they have the strongest navy, and so what is the Chinese response? Conventional thinking would be, okay, well, now we have to build up a navy that's stronger than the United States to be able to combat it and beat it back, and have a stronger and allow us to control trade over the high seas. And instead of going at it directly, they decided to sidestep the entire issue, and they said, all right, well, we're going to develop hypersonic missiles so that if you ever try to bring your navy to our doorstep, it won't work. We'll sink your ships. And then we're going to rebuild the Silk Road so that your navy is redundant anyway, and make it so that we can take goods from China and ship them all the way across Europe, or all the way across Asia into Europe, and all the way down into Africa as well. And we don't even need your ships. And the only market that we won't have available to us is yourself and South America. And quite frankly, South America, their economies aren't that big. Most of their goods are probably not going to South America. And America, it's like, all right, well, if you want our goods, then your navy is going to protect the shipping lanes going to your country anyway. And if you don't want our goods, then fine, we have 3/4 of the world to deal with anyway. That's plenty for us. And so it's a way to sidestep the entire issue. And so that's kind of what's going to be developing over the next couple of years. But that was kind of a summary of those things. I didn't do the best job, but hopefully you kind of have an understanding of what fourth generation warfare is a little bit more. It's light infantry tactics and doctrine that takes into consideration a strategic, operational, and on a strategic, operational, and tactical level, the moral, psychological, and physical elements to a attack. And it does this through guerrilla warfare and through other means. So that kind of covers that topic. Let me know what you guys think, and thank you guys for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe on whatever thing you are watching this on, and I hope you guys all have a good day. Goodbye.